And President Obama seems to be leaning toward a new way to encourage voters to head to the polls, vote or else. President Obama says it's mandatory to vote in Australia, and he wants to see that happen in the U.S. But there are some other issues as well. Some people see not voting as a political statement, and it may run afoul of the First Amendment. In last year's midterm elections, the turnout among eligible voters, less than 40%. And that is our topic this half hour, and we want to hear from you on Facebook and on Twitter. Joining us live in the newsroom is Fox 26 senior legal analyst Chris Tritico, Fox 26 news analyst Mustafa Tamiz, and public policy analyst Jackie Bally. All right, you guys, even from in here, I can tell Jackie's tongue is almost bloody because she's biting it, and she just can't wait to talk about this topic.
That's exactly right.
I can't wait to hear what she has to say either. But listen, first I got to make a major announcement here that's very important. As you know, Nate Griffin and I bet on the Super Bowl, and I proved that Nate doesn't know as much about sports as I do, and won the Super Bowl bet. He had to buy breakfast for the entire Sunday crew. So we're betting again on the Final Four. And I will win again, and he will have to buy a second breakfast. So that's coming up. Just stay tuned for that. President Obama, Nate's standing over here. President Obama mentioned this in a speech as to make mandatory voting in the United States mandatory. First, I think that the constitutional law experts who have come out and said this would violate the First Amendment are right. So I think it's a very tough road to make it mandatory in the United States, where we have a constitution that says we are free to do what we want, and not voting is one of those things you're entitled to do. Why anyone wouldn't vote, I don't know. Why you would give up that right that you have to shape our country and our politics and the way the country goes, I don't know. But that's the way it is. The president knows that most of the people who don't vote in this country are the poor and minorities. And so by making it mandatory, wouldn't that, Jackie Bally, I think we'll start with you this time, wouldn't making mandatory voting laws boost the Democratic Party?
Well, shocker. The president is making statements and want to incorporate a law that would help his party. He's not political at all. Of course, that's why he's saying it. And this is proof once again that sometimes just because a thought goes in your head doesn't mean you actually have to talk about it, because I do agree with a lot of the professors, the constitutional professors, who are coming out and saying that it would be illegal, it would infringe on our rights. And I don't think this is something that would actually come into fruition. It would not become law. This is something that popped in his head. He said it, and let's move on.
Well, it started a pretty good conversation, I think. In the last presidential race, less than 37% of the United States voting population voted. In Australia, where it's mandatory, over 90% of the people voted. The president said making it mandatory would be transformative of our system, because we would have almost everyone participating, and that would necessarily take big money out of politics.
And that was his point. First, I don't agree with what he in making voting mandatory. I don't think that's a good concept. But just think about what he's saying and what Jackie has just talked about too, right? That if actually more people voted, if we had a more representative democracy and people were more engaged, that the president's party would win. And look at what the Republicans are doing. They're doing everything possible to get less and less people to vote. Voter ID bills, all host of things that they're working on. So, so when we say that, American public opinion, if you look at the voting population, the trends have been lower and lower, and especially in local elections, like municipal elections. You'll see almost 20–25% of the people vote that are registered to vote on municipal elections.
Hold on, I know. Hold on, we got to go to Dominique.
Okay.
We'll come back to Jackie in just a minute.
There's that blood dripping from Jackie's tongue.
Yes, it is.
All right, on social media, Arnetta Murray says mandatory voting, it should be a choice. Don't force folks to vote. Also, Fula Luff, I guess you pronounce that, says voting should be mandatory, says a guy who missed over 300 roll call votes in his 4 years in Senate. You sure that didn't come from Jackie Bally? Julia Pfeiffer says other countries have mandatory voting, question mark, exclamation point. Once again, sounding like a kid giving a reason to his mother.
Well, in defense of the president, he was citing a pretty good stat that in the countries that do have it, they have over 90% of the population voting. That doesn't make it lawful in the United States, where we have a constitution with a First Amendment that says we're free. And so we're free to make political statements, and not voting can be one of those.
Yeah, a couple of things. Just because you have more people voting does not mean you have more people engaged. That's the first thing. Because just because there are more people coming does not mean that they're informed and they know what they're doing. That necessarily doesn't mean if they have a D or an R by their name, period. Second of all, I think the arrogance of our president, he's making the statement because we saw during midterm elections his party got annihilated. And he's implemented quite a few executive actions that have been questionable. A majority of our voters have disagreed with him. And he's saying, well, it's because the Democrats or certain people didn't vote. And so I think the arrogance of him saying, well, you know, I heard the 1/3 of the people who did vote, but I really heard the 2/3 who didn't vote because his party got killed. It's not that we're uninformed, it's because we knew, the ones of us who did vote, we knew we wanted those people out, and we knew we didn't like his
But in
actions.
his defense, it wasn't a policy announcement. It was just it was an idea floated.
It was a dumb thought, and that's why I said,
Was it a
typical
dumb
of
thought?
him. It's a dumb thought that came out. He needs to keep it to himself.
I think the major issue he's trying to address is that there's too much money in politics, and with the Supreme Court decisions that basically allow people to put in as much money as they want, put it privately without having it disclosed. That issue is not, because we've kind of come to a point where free speech is equivalent to money. So it's not free speech. The more money you have, the more speech you can have. And he's trying to look for the balance to say, how do I get the average person's voice into the political process? Because at this point, the millionaires and the billionaires are running our political system.
But in doing that, hang on, in doing that, isn't he directly attacking the Koch brothers?
I don't think he's just attacking the Koch brothers. At this point, what's happened is that money on both sides, people that have enormous amount of wealth. In this next presidential election, for example, they'll be putting, the Koch brothers, as you know, have said they're going to put in $1 billion worth of money in the next presidential race. So when you start putting $1 billion in the political process, that's more than Barack Obama raised and spent in the last election.
Yeah,
One
but
person's
Barack
going to do it.
Obama raised and set many, many records by raising more money than any other candidate in history. So I think it's ironic now that he's not running anymore. Let's get money out of the process. And when you bring more people into the voting and political process, you need to spread the message to everyone. So that does involve more money.
But we got to wrap
So the
up.
thought process behind let's have everyone vote, but it'll cost less money makes absolutely no sense.
We got to wrap, but real quickly, does one group putting $1 billion into a presidential campaign, doesn't that influence the outcome in a negative way, regardless of who it is?
Well, we've seen it go both ways. We've seen some groups that pour a lot of money, and then the person who spent barely 1/8 of what the other person spent win. It just depends on who the candidate is.
Real quick, final thought on that question.
People that, look, you know, I'm somewhat beneficiary of the people that put a lot of money in politics, so in full disclosure, right? But when people put a lot of money in politics, not that they're just trying to win something. What they're doing is they're forcing the debate on issues that they care about. And that marginalizes the large amount of voice. And in terms of Barack Obama raising money, he also brought more, lower dollar donors, and that's how he raised money.
And we got to grow. But before Barack Obama raised that much money, George Bush had raised the most money ever, and so that's going to change every year now.
Well, he didn't raise the money from lower dollars. That's not how he raised the majority.
That's what he's known for.
If you look at his,
all right, we got to go.
Yeah.
We're going to leave it right there. I got to stop them.
Always a
This will
good
take the
debate.
rest of the show.